Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. We are from 7 group. So, in this video, we would like to present our material of language testing, that is testing language skill listening. So, before we start this presentation, please allow me as the moderator to introduce the member of this group. So the member of this group consists of three presenters. There are Dewi Surya as the third speaker, Fafara Vinayar as the second speaker, and the last is me or Rositawati as the first speaker and also as the moderator. Well, let's start this presentation, and first material will be delivered by Rositawati. Okay, I will deliver the first material that is about language testing. So before we know about testing language skill of listening, we should know first about language testing. So what is language testing? The language testing is the practice and study of evaluating the proficiency of an individual in using a particular language effectively. And then, what is testing? A task is an activity whose main purpose is to convey, or usually to the tester, how well the test knows or can do something. And then the next is listening task. What is listening task? Listening is a language skill, and listening skill is very important. Therefore, like any other skills, listening skill must be taught and taught properly and regularly. When conducting listening tasks, different aspects of language should also be taught. It includes grammar knowledge, discourse knowledge, pragmatic knowledge, sociolinguistic knowledge, and etc. And then from the great psychologist Carl Rogers said, listening is the great power. Is a great power known to men to have the potential of others. Real communication only happens when we hear it to understand and understand. To see ideas and attitude from the perspective of others. This is the key to being a master motivator and persuader. Okay, the last material will be delivered by me. That is why listening task is important. So, this is the actual listening stage whereby students are asked to the exercise based on the audio. The main purpose of this stage is to help the students develop the skill of eliciting message from spoken language. And then the next material will be delivered by Fafara Vinayar as the second speaker.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Fafara Vinayar Kastra. I will continue explanation about types of language testing. There are 5 main types of language testing. The first is language proficiency test, the second is aptitude test, and the third diagnosis test, and the fourth placement test, and the last achievement test. Okay, the first explanation about language proficiency test. Proficiency testing measures a person's level of skill in a language independent of how they learn it. Proficiency tests share some similarities with achievement tests, but rather than focusing on knowledge, proficiency tests focus on the practical application of the knowledge. Proficiency tests measure a language user comprehension and production against a rating scale, whereas most of the tests we've looked at are primarily associated with academic context. Proficiency tests are useful in a variety of settings. Anyone can take a language proficiency test regardless of how they learn the language and where they believe they are in their level of competency. Proficiency tests accordingly measure the candidate ability to use a language in real life context. Okay, the second explanation about aptitude test can refer to a person's capacity to learn something. Aptitude tests do not measure how well a person uses a particular language, but how well they acquire language skill in general. Due to the nature of the test, it is more general than most other language tests and does not focus on a specific language. Instead, they assess how quick and effectively a person can learn a new skill. Therefore, you can use type of testing when selecting candidates for roles that require men to learn a new language. The third explanation about diagnosis test. Proficiency tests usually provide a general assessment of a person's language skill set. In contrast, diagnosis tests identify specific strengths and weaknesses within that skill set. Use this type of test to identify specific ways to improve. On the diagnosis test, most taker encounter questions or texts that are outside the scope of their abilities and the material they are familiar with. The result of the wrestler reveal the strength and weakness in one language abilities. Have a student diagnosis test result can help teacher formulate lesson plans that fill the gaps in the student current capabilities. Student can also use diagnosis tests to determine which areas they need to work on in order to reach a higher level of proficiency. The fourth explanation about placement tests. Placement tests share some similarities with diagnosis tests. They are used for educational purpose and are administered before a course or program of study begins. In this case, the application is a bit different. Educator and administrator use placement tests to group language learners into classes or study group according to their ability level. A university may give a placement test to determine whether a new French major need to take introductory French course or skip over some course and begin with more advanced class. Placement tests are also an important types of test in English language testing in university level, since international students typically come in with different English learning background and proficiency level. And last explanation about achievement tests. An achievement test evaluated a student language knowledge to show how their learning has progressed. Unlike diagnosis, aptitude, and placement tests, achievement tests only cover information the student should have been exposed to in their studies too far. Achievement tests are typically given after a class completes a certain chapter of unit, or at the conclusion of the course. A teacher may give a final exam and the end of the semester to see how well a student has retained the information they were taught over the course in the semester. Achievement tests are typically grades and are meant to reflect how well student is performing in their language learning studies. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you. Next will be a explanation by my partner Dewi Surya. For Dewi Surya, time is yours.
Listening test. First, limited response. Native language response. In this technique, we can use a small quiz that can be used in early learning. For example, I teach the Spanish, German, and Arabic. Then, I ask them to listen to a single English audio. Then, I give a question of English. Then, they may answer by using their native language. Picture choose. Using virtual image technique. Can you sketch with the help of projectors? The student identify image or can also with T or F according to the picture. Task response can be done individually or group. Example of drawing task: Students listen to the instruction given by the teacher. The third is multiple choice appropriate response. Alternative form of limited response, choosing the best statements. Students look at the one picture, but they hear three statements. They choose the one that best match the pick. Multiple choice appropriate response. Items to test listening comprehension, focus on meaning. Keep the option simple and learn to adjust the difficulty of the items. Use vocabulary and grammar that your student already know. The object is to measure only the student understanding of particular sentence of short dialogue. Example question: when Jake leaves, they'll hire you one day. A. Yes, you will. B. Yes, he's leaving. C. Yes, they will. The correct reply is C. Notice that students, in order to answer correctly, have to see what information is directly related to the question and what is not directly related to it. For example, the question suggests that Jake will leave, but this is not the main point of the inquiry. Therefore, B is not appropriate. And next is keep the option simple. When Jake leaves, they'll hire you, won't you? A. Yes, you will. B. Yes, he's leaving. C. Yes, they will. Next, learn to adjust the difficulty of the items. When Jake leaves, they'll hire you, won't they? A. Yes, you will. B. Yes, he's leaving. C. Yes, they will. Suppose it we need situation. We could simply V the item and we could make the structure less correct. The third is texting extended communication. Our survey of listening test would not be complete without looking at exam of extended oral communication. Students, especially those in college, need to understand talks and lectures. The first is examiner voice. Following a dialogue, we can introduce a third voice. For example, after an advertisement, examiner may ask, where is the conversation taking place? A. At church. B. At the restaurant. C. At the home. Sentence completion. A printed sentence completion item is also acceptable. For example, during the discussion, the lady blah blah blah. A. Book an airplane tickets. B. Check it on someone like. C. Check it in at a airplane terminal. And the last is open-ended responses. Open-ended responses is easier to write, but they put more of a burden on the student and they complicated scoring. But if only simple responses are called for, this is legitimate alternative to the multiple choice listening comparison question. After the airplane check-in passage, we will have the following. Thanks.
Okay, that's all our presentation about testing language skill listening. Thank you for your attention, and if you have a questions, we will discuss in the WhatsApp group for 5HPBI. Okay, thank you and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.